here on the Nightcast. We've got a special episode today. We are going to be talking about the arts, what it means to Providence, how we view it. But I've got two special guests with me today. I've got Gina Gill. She is our orchestra teacher, instructor, all things strings. And then I've got Jamie Burns. She is our art teacher in elementary school. And she has her hands on a lot of the different parts of the art program here at Providence Academy. So thank you guys for coming.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Yeah. So let's start just by asking that question, what is art? You know, I think that's like the ultimate question that a lot of people and even professional artists may have a really hard time answering that question. So like, what would we say like would be the general idea of the world? So like, you're not at Providence Academy, you're at NYU, you're answering the question, what is art? What do you think the typical answer for that is?
I think that outside of Providence and in the world, your answer is going to be art is what you make it. Art is whatever you want it to be. If you label it art, then it is. I find that a lot, that it's very subjective.
Yeah, that's, you often hear like art is whatever is a reflection of truth. And you hear that a lot. Mm-hmm. And so when you start answering that question and you don't have a plumb line for truth, then that's when it gets, because it's my truth and your truth and everyone's truth is different. And then that's how you end up with like a banana taped to a wall. And you're like, that's my truth.
Or an invisible sculpture that sells for a lot of money.
Right.
With directions on how to install it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you get that question. I think it was Pilate that asked that question of Jesus. What is truth? Yeah. I think that is really what is foundationally at the heart of what is art. Mm-hmm. And you see that. And so, you know, when you pull back to Providence, we would say that it is going to be what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. And you're going to hear that refrain over and over and over again in a classical Christian education. Is we're always going to be talking about what truth is, what goodness is, and what beauty is. And that kind of is what the rest of our art flows out of. So when we do that, like defining those terms is critical. Yeah. Because you see, if you don't define truth the same, it's like, and we could say, oh yeah, we're all talking about truth, but we're talking about something different. Mm-hmm. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble. It's like Harvard, their slogan is, or slogan, I don't know, motto is veritas, which is Latin for truth. And when they started, absolutely, they probably would have defined it exactly how we define it. Mm-hmm. But over time, they just decided to redefine that term. And so that kind of got them into trouble. Do you see that in the music? I guess music, and especially strings, because there's no words.
Right.
Right. And so how do you see that playing, that absence of truth playing out in music and in strings music? Or do you?
Well, it's tricky because it's such a broad spectrum. Music, you know, we have classical composers that go far, you know.
I guess with string music too, it's kind of like, it's hard to build a postmodern architecture because at the end of the day, you still have to have a foundation, and you still like truth is there no matter what. Because if not, the music, it won't stand. Your building will not stand without truth in an absolute sense of it. I feel like especially orchestra has a sense of, it relies on sound structure, math, basic principles that build music to stand.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think music, it's an individual art, but it's very much a group community product. And so there is truth that's made through the music, and through string music with the notes and the theory behind it. There's that need for that perfection to get the notes and get those things right and to get the truth through that. But there's also a lot of leeway. And I think with art in general, it doesn't always have to be perfect.
Sure. Yeah, no, that's that, and there's an element of truth that lies within that as well. So if we were to like really put a nail on it at Providence, we would say like truth is defined through two things. We would say first it would be God's word. We would say the infallible word of God is like the plumb line of truth. I'm actually going to throw a third thing in there too. Okay. So number two is going to be through the revelation of God through his creation. So he would say he'd make his inmost qualities known through his creation, so that man would be without excuse. So he's also displayed some of his truth in creation. So in places where we look at God's word and we're like, I'm not really sure, we look at his creation, and those can help fill in some of those gaps that we might not understand. He doesn't go into like gravity in the Bible. He's not like, well, then gravity does this. It's like, no, but we know that through his creation. And so we can know truth there. And then I would put that third thing would be the personhood of Jesus Christ, and also the godlyhood of Jesus Christ. And so there's that aspect of who he was. When Pilate asked him that question, what is truth? It's like, you're looking at him. Yeah, right. Like, I am here embodied in the flesh. And so those pieces are so critical when you're trying to decide what is art. And if you have something that violates those things, then we would have to say like, we're going to have to pull that aside, and we're actually going to have to say that something might be ugly. And that's like offensive right now. Anytime you put, or intolerance is the ultimate sin. And it's like, okay, it can get really weird when you have an actual line of truth. Now, do you see that playing out in the art world?
Absolutely. I know that a lot of times kids will come in and I don't know where they get it from. They'll just say, I'm not good at art. I'm not an artist. I have no skill in this area. And I like to remind them that, God is the master artist, and that you have the potential inside of you, because you were made in his image, to be an amazing artist. It takes practice. It's like learning anything. It's learning an instrument. It's learning a sport. It's learning an academic subject. It just takes practice. And so I pull that out of them. So I don't let them stop there. They'll say, I just can't. I'm like, well, you can. You're just going to take more effort. And I like to remind them that I give them, I tell them this. I say that, God gave us his best when he gave us Jesus. He held nothing back. He gave us his very best. And so art as worship to me is giving him back our best, So that's how I lay it out there. So I won't let them slide with I can't, or this is all I can do. This is my best. We try to dive a little deeper.
That's so beautiful. Yeah, because kids have that ability. And it's rarely that you find like a 4-year-old never says I'm bad at art.
Right. It's older.
As we get older, we become more insecure in those things. But you're right that we're image bearers of God. And there was a part of that creation mandate where he was like, have dominion.
Yeah.
And then producing art is one of those ways that we get to fulfill that creation mandate, and we get to kind of step into those shoes. Not to saying that we are God, but that we are saying, okay, we are, as image bearers of God, we get to be creators.
Yes.
Right.
And music lets children and people really take part in that. I think that that's what part of the reason that we love it, and that kids love it. My daughter Rose, she loves the violin, and she plays, and she loves I think it's just that idea of creating something beautiful and getting to be a part of it makes her come alive, and makes her really excited. We were drawing. I think right now we're drawing flowers.
Yes, we're drawing flowers.
We spent all weekend drawing flowers and doing those things, and she drew this rose, and it was awesome. And she was so excited just to kind of take part in that. And so I think that that's important to be able to point that back and say, like, Rose, you're being part of creating something.
Right. Yeah. There's a bigger picture.
And then when you do that in community, I guess in an orchestra, tell me a little bit about that experience and what that looks like.
Well, I always ask my students, you're like a flower, okay? And you're working and you're practicing and you're watering your plant and you're sowing the seeds, and it takes time. And when you leave, I don't want you to feel like that was all wasted, that the end product doesn't have to be perfect.
Right.
And,
because it takes a long time to get good at violin.
It takes a long time.
It really does.
And you've invested in it. And so the end is that there's something inside of you that when you're done your time at Providence, that it's in your bones almost, that creative part. And so in the orchestra setting, we talk a lot about how we're all members of one body. And so the cellos are just as important as the violins, and, you've got to put in the work to practice. But when you come here, we're a group, and there's just a lot of different moving parts and pieces to make that sound that you hear at the Christmas concert or the spring concert.
Yeah. I love that idea of it takes time.
Right.
Yes.
Our culture so badly wants instant gratification.
Right.
Yes.
I want to push a button and all of a sudden be a master. And like, I woke up like this and everything's great. Where, playing a stringed instrument, it takes years and years and years.
Right.
Rose started playing when she was 4, and hope she's not listening. She just now got like bearable
Right.
in like
It
the
takes
last
time.
year. And so that aspect of, but there's so much reward
Yes.
Right.
that we've taken out of our kids as a culture to say like, no, you're going to struggle and you're going to work hard and it's not going to come all at once. There's such a reward to be able to reap the harvest of that. Because I'm sure that like Rose sometimes will get frustrated when she's drawing because
Yes.
it will not look like Daddy's. Not that I'm the world's greatest artist, but she's like frustrated. And I'm like, listen, when I was your age, I couldn't,
Yeah.
I was no better than you are. It's just, I've been drawing
Longer.
a long time. Like I put a lot of work into it. And so that is the only reason. It's not because you don't have it within you.
Right.
Right.
And I think that that's where in their mind, they're like, well, I just don't have it within me.
Yes.
It's like, no, it's in you.
It's definitely our job, I think, as their teachers, to remind them of that, to inspire them, to encourage them, to let them know that the potential is in you. I believe it's in all of them. And just to push that forward or pull that out of them.
Absolutely. What a calling.
Yeah.
To be able to be a part, to be able to be a part of that. So when going back to this art piece, we're going to talk about truth, and then we're going to talk about goodness and beauty. So if we're going to say truth is basically the full knowledge of God, as through his word, through his creation, through his son.
Okay.
And then we're going to say goodness are those actions that are aligned with that truth. So if you're going to do good works, those works have to be in line with the personhood of Jesus. They have to be in line with his word and in line with his creation. And then beauty, we're going to define is the majesty of God. And that's those moments where God moves in harmony with his truth and with his goodness that inspires awe. When you see that sunset or that sunrise, this morning we were driving into school, and it's a beautiful scene driving into Providence Academy. And the sunset was just striking. And you're like, oh, wow, what a God. You look at the stars and it makes you take a step back and you see the majesty of God. But you can also see that in someone's life.
Right.
And the restoration of the gospel and redeeming someone. Like, wow. And you can't necessarily put your finger on it, but something can't be beautiful if it is not good and it is not true.
Right.
And so all those things, we'll call them transcendentals. I was a bunch of big fancy words, but they were those truth, beauty, and goodness. They were with God in the beginning. They were in the community of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and they existed before time. And so those don't change. They're constant. And so those things play out, and art is really where we get to delve into those things on a deeper level. And if you can't answer those questions, what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful, it is really, really hard to teach art.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's why you see often organizations that cannot acknowledge what truth, goodness, and beauty are, they start to devalue
Yes.
art. And so you start seeing those programs removed from school because it's easy to say like, hey, you can't standardize test art.
Right.
Right.
And they start saying like, why are we doing this? Like, this isn't a good use of our time. This isn't going to get someone a job.
Right.
And at Providence, we're able to say, oh my goodness, can we do more art? Like, we've got to make more room for this because cultivating truth, beauty, and goodness and the affections of our students, like, that's way more important to us than a test score.
Right.
Yeah.
And so we find ourselves almost being like, whoa, like this could take over, but in a good way.
Right.
And having that excitement around that program. So I'm excited. So we've had a visual art program for quite some time. So I want to talk a little bit about our strings program, and then I want to talk a little bit about our, like, we have like phases. I don't know.
Cycle.
Yeah, cycle. There it is. I want to talk about that in a second, but I want to talk a little bit about our strings program, maybe how that started and what that looks like where we are in that progression.
Yes. Well, I remember, Mr. Holland, when you approached me 4 years ago, you said, I want to do a strings program, but I don't know what that looks like, and it's probably going to be really small. And so I said, let's go for it. Let's do it. And we did. We started out really small. Started with secondary, eventually elementary school. And it's taken off. I think Providence is a wonderful place to have a string program.
Yeah. How many students do we have?
I don't know. I don't, we've got, maybe 60-ish.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's grown a lot. But for me, I think when you were talking about beauty and goodness, as I haven't actually counted how many students we have this year because I've been so busy with schedules and getting instruments and lesson planning. And, but what I love the most about the string program at Providence is that we can really take our time, and get the fundamentals down for these students and, really build a relationship with them. So I love that, I get to know these students and have these students for years. I've had students for 4 years, and I don't think that's going to go away. I'll continue to have them until they graduate. And so what's really unique about the string program at Providence is we're not pressured or rushed into, because it is a smaller program, we're not rushed into orchestra competitions or, getting our name out there. We can build relationships with the students and, let them know the truth in music, and give them a chance to develop as a musician, but also in a group, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a big piece of it is that at a K through 12 or pre-K through 12 school, we get to have the long view in mind.
Right.
We don't have to force something to come too quickly.
Right.
We can take our time because I've got you for 14 years.
Right.
Yeah.
And so if you can start when you're in preschool, getting your hands and just learning how to hold it properly and all those things is like, okay, great.
Right.
Then next year we can take another step. And then over that course of time, hopefully we will have taught you how to master something.
Right.
And then how to set yourself up in a way that you'll be able to be a learner of music for life and a lover of music for life.
Right.
Maybe you don't pick up a violin after you graduate. That's okay. When you hear an orchestra, you're going to have a lot more appreciation for what it took to get there and appreciation for the effort and the work that it took for that group to get to the point where they are. So as a program now, we're in year 4 or 5 of saying like, okay, we started and we just had some students and then we were starting private lessons and we're doing lessons during the school day or right after school. A big part of Providence is that we want to make it easy for families to be able to do all the things.
Right.
Because we value that home time, that time around the dinner table with my family is one of the most important parts of my day, because that's when I get to speak truth over my children in a relational way and hear from them. And so we want to protect that as much as we can. And so in a similar, if you didn't have an environment like this, if you wanted to take violin lessons, you would have to get out of school, drive 20 minutes to somewhere, then you sit in a parking lot for 45 minutes, and then you drive. You've burnt so much time. It's just not efficient.
Right.
And so saying like, okay, we're going to do lessons at Providence, sometimes during the school day, sometimes right after school. And so you eliminate those transitions for families so they can be done with their violin lessons by 3:15.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, I was going to pick you up at 2:45. Now I picked you up at 3:15.
Right.
That's great. So it allows more children to have access.
Right.
Because if not, families might be like, we're just not interested in putting that much effort forth. Now it's like, listen, we've been blessed with a few grants, so we've purchased a lot of instruments. We're getting ready to purchase like $20,000 more.
Yes.
Yes. And so that's exciting. And so you can rent those instruments from the school for a very small cost, basically our maintenance fee.
Right.
And so you've got access to the instruments. The lessons are here, and we can provide them at a low cost because we pay our instructors, but I'm going to have to heat and cool and all that stuff, all those things that usually you need for infrastructure. The school's already got that in place.
Right.
So we can provide you a high quality product at a low cost and easy to access, because I think that the more kids that have the opportunity to learn a musical instrument and get exposure to that, the more it's going to open up their life.
Yes. Absolutely.
And so we're moving forward. That I'm excited to see that group of students that we started with in the first kindergarten, first, second grade. I'll be excited to see what that looks like when they hit high school.
No, it is. I mean, you can already see the end product from what they've already done in 3 or 4 years. You know, I love dropping my kids off at school and seeing all the students with those black instruments walking in. I mean, it's just so precious. Because 3 or 4 years ago, you didn't see that. And so it's huge. You know, all those lives have been changed. And relationally, even if they decide, you know, it's not for them, they still were in the classroom at some point and, you know, their lives were changed. So.
Right. Yeah. Learning to read music, all those things. We also have a percussion program. That has grown and is expanding. And so we're excited to see how that plays in. And we're going to be combining that percussion and orchestra piece in some ways as we kind of develop in the future. I've always had the dream of having an orchestra in the pit of a musical. And then the art program to have done set design. And it's like it all comes together in one beautiful display that our kids can take part of and be creators in, and it really would draw our community together as a whole around something true, good, and beautiful. I think that is going to have such an impact, but it doesn't happen overnight. School, you can't abracadabra that.
Right.
And it takes a long institutional commitment and doing the hard things. And sitting through some of those little kids' first orchestra concert where you're just like, woo! Can't wait till this is over. It takes years of that to be able to get there. But I believe that is going to play off in dividends for our families and for our kids, which is exciting.
Well, there's the turtle and the hare, the race, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's kind of wonderful to be the turtle.
Yeah, just to take our time and do things the right way.
Right.
I'm thankful that Providence is giving more opportunities for the arts, because I know in our family, music is just as important. In fact, all 3 of my kids play violin, so they've been in the program from the start with Miss Gill. And so we're thankful for these opportunities. And I mean, I have my oldest who's in 8th grade, and she's like, Mom, she's not taking a study hall. Like, she's doing orchestra and art because she just loves them all. And so those opportunities for those children that love it, like, we're thankful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about the art program and the cycle that happens.
Okay, we are set up on a 6-year cycle, and it pretty much moves chronologically through time. So if you start, but it depends on the year that you start at Providence, because we're in a cycle. So this year we're studying French and Post-Impressionism. And another great thing about the art cycle is that we really do fine art at Providence. I don't know any other schools at this level, the elementary level, that we're focusing on fine art. So I appreciate that. Like, we love arts and crafts, and they get lots of that in the classroom too. But as far as what we do in the art room is fine art. And we try to create, we take our time, like Gina was saying, we take our time and we put our best effort in these pieces that are going to be keepsakes, like fine art pieces that we frame and we value. So every year within that cycle, we're studying the artists from that time period. We're looking at fine art. We're going to be able to recognize those things. If you're walking through a gallery with your, fifth grader, and they've gone through with me since pre-K or kindergarten, they're going to know these names, and they're going to have this appreciation for art. And so we try to stick true to whatever that time period is. So this year with Impressionism, we're going to be starting our first project with pastels, because there was Edgar Degas and Mary Cassatt, and that's what they were using. And then we're going to dive into painting, because that's what they were doing. So depending on the cycle, like with Greek and Roman, of course, we're getting into clay, we're building pots. With prehistoric art, we're making our own paint, and we're experimenting with all the different art mediums. So it's such a wonderful thing to be able to teach these kids starting, 4 or 5 years old, what I was learning with an art degree in college. So it's a very different setup. And again, I'm thankful for the opportunity to be able to impart that to kids starting so early.
So when we talk about art and just like putting in the time, a big part of Providence is that we're going to spend at least twice as much as your typical school in an arts environment. And a lot of people would think that would take away from our test scores. We have the best test scores. So we don't, it's actually the opposite of truth in that. But that just putting in the institutional work, I think is critical when we think about, we're not just going to be like, okay, here's some glue and some, what are those little pipe cleaners?
Yes.
When I took some art in elementary school and spent a lot of time with pipe cleaners, making like a basket or a little thing for whatever, an Easter basket or something like that. Spending a little bit more time, as you talked about earlier, really in fine art.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that I have a whole curriculum now for pre-K, and it's an introduction to art, and we're talking fine art again. We're talking about the elements of art, the principles of design, and I like to explain that to them. Like, the elements of art are kind of like your ingredients if you're making cookies. So that's your ingredients, and then the principles of design are the recipe, and that's how you put all these things together. And so they start off with this foundation of knowing what it takes to make art that is beautiful, because it's not just like thrown together. And then you keep going through the program so that you get this cycle, this chronological art history, and the opportunity to create art in that same style. And then if they choose to go on and take these extra art credits upstairs, then they've got Mrs. Milburn building more on that foundation. She's teaching new styles of art and more in-depth focus of maybe it's a material, like a new medium that they're using, or just a different technique that it just builds. And so that when you move forward in life as an adult, most jobs are going to hire the person who's creative, who has that extra. It's like a bonus. They are able to think creatively, and that they have that. I don't know. I just think of it as a bonus.
Yeah. I would even say it's more than a bonus.
Yeah.
I would say it's the foundational piece.
Yeah.
That adults need. We put together, we have like a little faculty choir, and we sing for the kids because we want them seeing us participating in the art that we promote.
Right.
As a man, being able to, I play guitar, I sing, I draw, I paint, I do all those things at home because it's just part of being human.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have those skills, because we all would love to be able to sit down and express ourselves well.
Right.
But if you don't have the foundational skills, then you're going to be frustrated by that.
Yes.
Right.
And so giving them those skills so as they grow up into adults, they can be creative, not just in their professions, but to express themselves, to deal. And to deal with being made in God's image and in a fallen world, the conflicts that come with that, art and the ability to express yourself through that really is a beautiful way to walk through that as an adult.
Right.
And so it's not just for the ability to create something nice that people will look at and say that's pretty.
Right.
But it's also the ability to work through our personhood of being image bearers and walking in that. I think that art gives us that opportunity. And so when I'm looking for employees, creativity is your number one.
Yeah.
And then we'll build the skills from there. So I would even say it's not just a bonus, it's foundational. I don't know, in my house we have a bookshelf in our living room, and it's got pots and all the different things
the
they've
weavings,
done. Tapestries, mosaics, all of those things that we've done since they were in kindergarten, kind of going through the art program here, and the value that brings, so that hopefully they, again, appreciate. You may not become the world's greatest artist, and you might not do a lot of art after you leave Providence, but you might.
Yeah.
And you be prepared to do that. But even if you don't, your appreciation of that, and you're cultivating the affections to what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful, and being able to recognize it. It's a little bit cliche, but how counterfeit detectors, how do they find counterfeit money? They don't spend a lot of time studying counterfeit money. They spend a lot of time with the real thing. And then as soon as they touch a counterfeit piece, they're like, oh, that doesn't feel right. That's not right. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is. I can't exactly say it. We want the same with what is true, what is good, and what is beautiful. So we're going to expose them to true, good, and beautiful art every day for 14 years.
Yes.
And then if they run into something that someone says, this is art, and they see it and they behold it, they're going to be like, wait a minute.
Is it?
Something's not right. And then they'll be able to have the skills through the classical education aspect to be able to ask those hard questions and get to the bottom of what's really going on here.
Right.
And next year we hit on that a lot because we study contemporary and modern art. And so there are art movements like Dada and all these other ones that really push what is art, and we're questioning that. And so we get to talk through these things because they will, do things that you're like, is that art? Is it? It's definitely not beautiful in terms of what I would think is beautiful. But so we tackle those hard.
So this concept of God being the ultimate creator, and how when we create, that we're mimicking him. And we're taking part in this creation mandate that he placed in front of us, is so critical to a Christian education. It's very uniquely a Christian education concept. So how on a daily basis what does that look like in an art classroom? Like, so what are some things that you might say at a Providence Academy that might not be said anywhere else?
I like to remind the students that even though sometimes art can seem crazy and it can seem like there's no plan or no purpose, that God is a God of order, and that he started day one creation. Like, he had a plan, he had a design. So we always start every project with a sketch, with a design, with a plan, with intent and purpose. And so we build on that, and also it's just wisdom. It's good management of your resources, so you're wasting less, and you're being intentional about what you're doing and what you're using. So that's one way that it's kind of applicable in the classroom.
Yes. Yeah. You see that design piece when we look at creation, and you see that design piece when we're working with art, starting with the end in mind. That's great. What about in the music classroom?
Well, I love that word intentional because it's important for me to help the students be intentional about what they're producing. And so I think in music and in the drama program at Providence, we do get to do those unique things that you cannot do in other schools. Christian music, our Christmas programs, we can do hymns and do songs that you wouldn't be able to do in a public school. And so those must seem like simple, things because we can do it because we're at a Christian school, but it's not. It's pretty powerful to get to combine and do a music video where we have students from kindergarten to 12th grade participating, playing an instrument or singing. I think those are all unique.
I think it comes back to the ability that we have at Providence to turn it into worship, to turn it into our gratitude and our thankfulness, just for what God's already done for us. It's just a way to say thank you with the arts.
Yeah. It gives a chance for the students to kind of refocus on why we're doing what we're doing. We're not doing this just to put on a show. There's a bigger picture. And I think that the students really embody that. I know my students don't walk away thinking, oh, I did this. It's just this real sweet, it flows from their heart, kind of this worship in its uniquely creative way.
Yeah, that aspect. I always say that every kid at Providence Academy needs to have a place where they feel like they belong and they feel like they bring value.
Right.
And if they didn't show up for 3 days, that people would be like, where's Johnny?
Yeah.
Our orchestra group's not the same without him. Or the art show wasn't the same because Johnny wasn't here this year. And it's just, man, his work was always, I loved it. There's a piece of that where every kid needs to feel like they belong. And sports brings a big piece of that. But the arts do that in just a very different and unique way. They have an ability to create a community. If you've ever been a part of a drama, I was in the school plays when I was in high school. I was like backstage stage crew. I still felt like, and then I always got pulled in because there's not a bunch of guys around. So I always ended up like having like singing parts of like, oh my goodness, how to get into this. But this idea of a community that comes together to create something is not that much different than a football, baseball, basketball team coming together to win a game. Right. They're very similar, but the beauty that those arts programs bring to that and how that plays out in a day-to-day at the school, I think is really incredible because God's calling us to live in community is often overlooked and it's often left out in our world. And you see that playing out in the lives of children that are isolated.
Right.
But the arts says like, no, you're gonna be in community and we're gonna rely on each other and love each other. And like you were saying earlier, everyone brings something to the table.
Right.
The bass and the cello and the violin, they all have to work together.
Right.
And it's not the same music if one of those is missing.
Right.
Just like when I was on stage crew.
Yeah.
You you still can't, you still need the props.
Right.
And I got to get them there.
Right.
And so everyone coming together shows the unique value. God says that we have value because we're in his image.
Yes.
Not necessarily not because of what we do, but because of who we are. We're his. And when you're in an orchestra, you bring value to that orchestra and you're sitting in that seat and you're there. And that is really a beautiful thing that an arts program that's well developed and intentional can do that almost nothing else can replicate.
Right.
So I love that about our program and how that plays out just in a classroom, in an orchestra, in a drama, drum line, whatever you're a part of, you're a part of something.
Right.
I also love that with the elementary music cycle and the elementary art that we're learning the same things together. So if we're studying Baroque art, they're getting Baroque music. And so how that all intertwines works really well. And I love too that we were talking about the individualism of the kids. And I don't like to grade artwork because I think that everybody is so unique and so different that it's a beautiful thing to compliment a child and just to see them light up and to know that they have done something well, or to see that light kind of come on where they're like, wow, maybe I really am good at this. Like, it's such a beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll have students who are so quiet in their classroom, and they'll come stop by the orchestra room after school just to talk to me. And so it's just like, when they come to the room, it's like, this is my place, whether it's like art or choir or drama. Yeah, I think that's the internal part of their heart that I was talking about earlier. They're really comfortable here. And it's just this sense of unity. Mm-hmm.
Because they know they're not going to be critiqued harshly. Like, there's that freedom to create and to be who God made them to be.
Right.
Also within that. And
in the Holland House, we talk a lot about effort and not a lot about results.
Yes.
Because the idea that when you give your best effort, that if we truly believe that we're made in the image of God, and we've been faithful with the gifts that He's given us, and we've filled out our responsibility in that, then the end product of that doesn't belong to us. Mm-hmm. The end product of that belongs to God.
That's right.
And so I always say it doesn't matter if it's an A, B, C, D, E, F. If they gave their maximum effort, they practiced at home an appropriate amount of time, and they paid attention if they were in class and they gave their best effort, then whatever that product that comes out, we're going to celebrate.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, if they didn't practice,
that's another
and
story.
then they'd show up to the whatever the performance is, I don't even care if they did a good job. Right. If it sounded beautiful, I'm still going to say, like, hey, I don't know if you put forth your best. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you gave God your best in this. Mm-hmm. We got to make sure that we're being responsible in that. But if we're responsible in that, we're never going to downplay a student's work. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I do love about the arts program, is saying, like, hey, we're gonna praise effort.
Right. Yeah.
We're gonna praise diligence and focus and progress. And it is a place where we get to step away a little bit from some of those objective standards that we've just kind of placed out there. And you have to have them in certain places, but in the arts, you get to say, like, okay, show me your practice log. I'm more concerned with your practice log than I am concerned with you hitting that note perfectly.
Right.
And I think that that's a beautiful thing for us to learn, even as adults, to think through, like, okay, let's look at the practice log of my life. Yeah. That's way more important than the outcomes that happen, because those are from the Lord. We sow the seeds, but He reaps the harvest.
Right.
And that's where you get to flip it. And now it's worship.
Yeah.
Instead of, this is my work.
Right.
Now it's worship.
Yes.
And that burden gets to be taken off of you. So that's exciting, an exciting part of a really robust arts program, that we are not claiming that we have arrived in the arts program, but we are on a journey.
Yeah.
That it should be exciting to see how it grows and blossoms and matures, and then we'll be diligent in it, and we'll rest in the Lord and what He provides as the outcome on that.
Mm-hmm. And I think another unique thing about Providence and kind of how we strive for God's kingdom is the teachers, the fine arts teachers. We are collaborating and working together and trying to arrive to that bigger picture together. And that's wonderful and unique.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that teamwork and it has to be universal amongst your staff. Yeah. So all of your staff has to value the arts. Your math teachers have to have value in the arts. Your athletic program has to value the arts. And then we have to value each other. And that, when, again, people will know we are Christians by the way we love each other.
Yes.
Right. That's our biggest testimony. Yeah. And a big part of that is saying, like, okay, these kids are more important than my program.
Right.
And to be able to have that selfless attitude towards those things, to be able to do what's best for a child, and not just a child, but a family. And that is a different, unique piece because we get to have something to go back to. And again, we're not responsible for the outcomes.
Right.
We're responsible for being diligent in it, and then we trust God in those things. And so when you're trusting God for the outcomes, it allows collaborative work to happen because you're not worried about your outcome. Like, I've got to have this outcome. It's like, no. I'm supposed to be responsible for what I've been given, and have I put my best efforts into it.
Right.
And that, I think, actually does, over time, coincidentally, produce your best outcomes.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Hey, letting those first things be first. Now, but it doesn't always in the short run.
Right.
It's kind of like the shortcuts that you can, like there's shortcuts that you can use in music. Like you can shortcut your way to learn a complicated song really quick.
Right.
Instead of learning how to read music.
Right.
That doesn't actually mean that that's the best way to do it.
Right.
And to be able to, there's lots of shortcuts that you can take to get an outcome, a momentary outcome that you want. But doing things the right way, when you're focused more on the process, then your outcomes also become sustainable over time. Always working with Rose because she's got a mind that she can learn the finger placement quickly. That's just kind of how she's put together, and she can hear it and learn the finger placement. And I'm always making her read the notes. And she gets frustrated. She's like, Dad, I know I can play this song. I'm like, I know you can play the song, but can you play a C sharp?
Yes.
And it's like, I'm more concerned with you being able to read this music and to know that. And if there's 4 beats in a measure, a quarter note gets 1 beat. I'm more concerned with you knowing that than being able to do this song properly.
Right.
Those two things go hand in hand. But if you're going to play music long term,
Right.
knowing these things, putting the right things in the right order are so much more important. And she gets frustrated, and then I make a joke and we laugh about it, and then we keep on pressing on.
We're going to get through it.
Yeah,
Yes.
we're going to get through it.
She's got it.
Yeah.
She's really talented.
She's getting there. She's getting there. She's playing her scales last night. I was
Okay.
like, why don't you do weird? Anytime she's like, if she ever says I'm bored, I'm like, this is a perfect time to practice your violin.
I'm practicing at home.
Yes.
That's
There's no
awesome.
reason to be bored.
That's right.
So she was playing scales last night, and she's like, I don't have anything to work on. I'm like, find something.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah, those things come together, but we're excited about her. And then Tim's development. Tim is not as passionate about it, so we set the egg timer at home, and he wants to be able to see it. He wants to see that time tick down to be able to get out of there. But I'm like, buddy, this is just part of your development as a man. And you I love you, and I don't really care if you like this right now. You're just gonna.
It's important.
It is important for you to learn, because one day you might like it,
Right.
and if you don't have the skills, you won't be able. You won't have the fundamental pieces to do something that could bring so much value
Right.
and so much beauty to your life. You got to do the fundamental work right now.
Right.
And when you're 18, if you no longer want to do this, then okay.
Yeah, I mean, all the time people say, I wish my parents would have forced me to stick with it. All
Right.
the time I hear that.
I'm that parent.
That forces them?
Yes.
I force
my
mine.
kids are in
It's
it
good.
for the long haul. And I love the character that it develops, and just you just don't let them give up. You don't let them quit.
Yeah.
And just overcoming it. I've seen it in my own kids as they've all started playing at 6 and are continuing to play. The just pride, not in a bad way, but
Yeah, the kind your grandma talks about, not the kind of
Right.
that's bad in the Bible.
Right, exactly.
There's a difference.
So they're just proud of themselves because they worked for it.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good.
They could do a lot.
So when we talk about art and just like putting in the time, a big part of Providence is that we're going to spend at least twice as much as your typical school in an arts environment. And a lot of people would think that would take away from our test scores. We have the best test scores. So we don't, it's actually the opposite of truth in that. But that just putting in the institutional work, I think is critical when we think about, we're not just going to be like, okay, here's some glue and some, what are those little pipe cleaners?
Yes.
When I took some art in elementary school and spent a lot of time with pipe cleaners, making like a basket or a little thing for whatever, an Easter basket or something like that. Spending a little bit more time, as you talked about earlier, really in fine art.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that I have a whole curriculum now for pre-K, and it's an introduction to art, and we're talking fine art again. We're talking about the elements of art, the principles of design, and I like to explain that to them. Like, the elements of art are kind of like your ingredients if you're making cookies. So that's your ingredients, and then the principles of design are the recipe, and that's how you put all these things together. And so they start off with this foundation of knowing what it takes to make art that is beautiful, because it's not just like thrown together. And then you keep going through the program so that you get this cycle, this chronological art history, and the opportunity to create art in that same style. And then if they choose to go on and take these extra art credits upstairs, then they've got Mrs. Milburn building more on that foundation. She's teaching new styles of art and more in-depth focus of maybe it's a material, like a new medium that they're using, or just a different technique that it's just builds. And so that when you move forward in life as an adult, most jobs are going to hire the person who's creative, who has that extra. It's like a bonus. They are able to think creatively, and that they have that. I don't know. I just think of it as a bonus.
Yeah. I would even say it's more than a bonus.
Yeah.
I would say it's the foundational piece.
Yeah.
That adults need. We we have like a little faculty choir, and we sing for the kids because we want them seeing us participating in the art that we promote.
Right.
As a man, being able to, I play guitar, I sing, I draw, I paint, I do all those things at home because it's just part of being human.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have those skills, because we all would love to be able to sit down and express ourselves well.
Right.
But if you don't have the foundational skills, then you're going to be frustrated by that.
Yes.
Right.
And so giving them those skills, so as they grow up into adults, they can be creative, not just in their professions, but to express themselves, to deal, and to deal with being made in God's image and in a fallen world, the conflicts that come with that. Art and the ability to express yourself through that really is a beautiful way to walk through that as an adult.
Right.
And so it's not just for the ability to create something nice that people will look at and say that's pretty.
Right.
But it's also the ability to work through our personhood, of being image bearers and walking in that. I think that art gives us that opportunity. And so when I'm looking for employees, creativity is your number one.
Yeah.
And then, then we'll build the skills from there. So I would even say it's not just a bonus, it's foundational. And that's a big part of Providence Academy is we're training kids to be free people, and to live in the freedom of Christ. And so to do that, you have to be able to ask those questions, and you have to be able to wrestle with those things. And so our art program, I think, uniquely equips people to be free, and equips them for whatever that next step is, as opposed to an education that would say, like, okay, we only want you to produce. Your number one job as a human is to produce for society.
Right.
We would say, no, that's not your chief end of man. And art allows you to live as a free person and to live in the freedom of Christ and enjoy that thoroughly and deeply. And so excited about where our art program is heading. We hope that one day we would be able to build a facility that would kind of help bring those things together. If we did, we would name it the Center for Truth, Beauty, and Goodness. and really defining those terms so that it would be a bedrock that we could build our arts programs on going forward. But we're excited about that. But I wanted to thank you guys for taking your time.
Yeah, thank you.
And your afternoon to come and kind of share a little bit with our school, and excited to see where we're going in the future.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.